They saved the child, not the mother. What the K-9 did next stunned him. They arrived too late. The mountain was already quiet when Ethan reached the clearing. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that comes after something has already ended. Snow rested heavy on the ground, untouched except for one set of shallow footprints leading toward a fallen tree. The air smelled sharp and clean, the way it does right before dawn, but there was no warmth in it. No mercy. The woman lay on her side beneath the tree. One arm curved protectively around a small child pressed against her chest. Her eyes were half open, unfocused, frozen in the direction of the rising ridge. She was no longer breathing. There was no mist at her lips, no movement in her chest. Her body had already chosen stillness. The child had not. A faint sound slipped through the silence. Not a cry, not even a whimper. Just breath. Thin, uneven, barely there. Ethan dropped to his knees without thinking. His gloves burned against the cold ground as he reached for the child, carefully easing the small body free from the woman's arms. The child was alive. Just barely. Skin pale. Fingers stiff. But alive. Behind him, ASH stopped moving. The German shepherd stood several feet away, head low, ears pressed back, eyes fixed not on the child, but on the woman. Snow clung to his coat. His chest rose and fell slow and steady. He did not bark. He did not advance. He did not retreat. Ethan looked over his shoulder. "ASH," he said, his voice tight. "Come on." The dog did not respond. The wind pushed through the trees, carrying with it a low, hollow sound that moved down the slope like a warning. Tom was already against them. Rescue access was limited. The terrain was too steep. The weather was turning. Ethan wrapped the child in his jacket, pulling the fabric close, shielding the small body from the cold. He checked the child's breathing again. Still there. Weak. But there. He glanced back at the woman. At the way her arm was still curved, even in death. At the way her body leaned toward the child, as if she had been trying to give the last of her warmth away. ASH stepped forward once. Slowly, he moved to the woman's side and lowered himself beside her. His body pressed close, not for heat, not for comfort of his own, but as if he were standing guard over something sacred. He placed his head gently against her shoulder. Ethan froze. "ASH," he said again, louder this time. "We have to go." The dog did not look up. Ethan felt the familiar pressure build behind his eyes. The same weight he had carried for years. The same moment. The same choice. Save who you can. Leave who you cannot. He turned back to the child and focused. Breathing. Warming. Keeping the small chest moving. That was the mission now. That had to be enough. The woman was gone. ASH stayed. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Time lost its shape in the cold. The child's breathing steadied just enough to give Ethan hope. Not certainty. Just hope. Ethan stood carefully, holding the child close. He took a step back toward ASH. The dog did not move. Snow began to fall again. Light at first. Almost gentle. It settled on the woman's hair. On ASH's back. On the ground where no rescue would arrive in time. Ethan swallowed hard. "I will come back," he said quietly. He did not know who he was saying it to. ASH finally lifted his head. His eyes met Ethan's. There was no panic in them. No confusion. Only resolve. Ethan turned and began the long descent with the child held tight against his chest. Each step away felt heavier than the last. He did not look back again. He knew if he did, he might not leave at all. Above him, on the mountain, ASH lowered his head once more and pressed his body closer to the woman. He stayed as the snow fell thicker. He stayed as the light changed. He stayed when there was no one left to witness it. The child lived. The mother did not. And one soul did not die alone. The descent was slower than Ethan expected. Every step down the mountain pulled at his legs and at his chest in equal measure. The child was light in his arms, far too light, wrapped tight against him beneath layers of fabric and shared breath. Ethan kept his focus on the rise and fall of the small chest, counting each breath silently, letting nothing else take space in his mind. Snow brushed against his face as the slope leveled into a narrow trail. The trees thinned. The wind softened. Somewhere below, a rescue vehicle waited with heat and light and the promise of survival. The child stirred. A small sound escaped the lips. Not a cry, just a reminder that life was still there. Ethan adjusted his hold, angling the child closer to his heart. He felt the faint warmth returning, fragile but real. When he reached the trailhead, hands were already moving toward him. Blankets, Lights. Voices low and controlled. Someone took the child gently from his arms and disappeared into the vehicle. The door closed. The engine started. Ethan stood still. Snow continued to fall, settling into the empty space where the child had been. His arms felt wrong without the weight. Too light. Too free. He turned and looked back up the mountain. ASH was no longer visible. The ridge swallowed the clearing. The trees closed around the path. The mountain kept its silence. A medic touched Ethan on the shoulder. "You did the right thing," the voice said. Calm. Professional. Meant to steady him. Ethan nodded, but the words did not land. He had heard them before. Too many times. In too many places. Always spoken by people who were not there when the choice had to be made. He climbed into the vehicle and closed his eyes as heat filled the space. The smell of metal and clean fabric replaced snow and pine. His hands shook as the cold left them. The ride down took longer than it should have. Ethan watched the road pass beneath the tires and thought about the woman's arm curved around her child. Thought about the way ASH had lowered himself beside her without hesitation. Thought about the look in the dog's eyes when Ethan turned away. Not fear. Not confusion. Resolve. At the medical station, the child was carried inside. Doors opened and closed. Orders were spoken. Ethan remained outside, helmet in his hands, breath steady now but shallow. Minutes passed. Finally, a doctor stepped out and nodded once. The child will live. Ethan let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. His shoulders dropped. Relief came first. Then something else followed close behind. Heavier. Sharper. He looked back toward the mountain again. ASH was still there. Ethan knew it without seeing him. Night fell slowly. The sky darkened. Snow turned. The world quiet again. The mountain did not change. Later, when the vehicles were ready to move, Ethan did not climb inside. He turned back toward the trail. Someone called after him. He did not answer. The climb up was harder than the descent had been. His legs burned. His lungs worked against the thinning air. Snow clung to his boots. Still, he did not stop. When he reached the clearing, dawn was beginning to break through the clouds. Pale light touched the ground. The fallen tree stood unchanged. ASH was exactly where Ethan had left him. The dog lay beside the woman, body curved close, head resting near her shoulder. Snow covered his back now, dusting his fur white. His eyes opened when Ethan stepped closer. He did not move. Ethan knelt in the snow. The cold soaked through his pants immediately. He reached out and rested his hand on ASH's neck. The dog leaned into the touch. The woman lay peacefully now, her face softened by the stillness. Ethan removed his jacket and gently placed it over her, covering her shoulders, tucking the fabric close. ASH did not resist. He watched. The wind moved through the trees again, quieter than before. "I am here," Ethan said. The words were meant for both of them. ASH stayed. "If you are still here, stay with them for a moment longer, because some stories only speak when you do not leave." Morning settled fully over the mountain. Light moved slowly across the clearing, revealing what the night had hidden. Snow softened the edges of everything. The fallen tree, the ground beneath it, the still form beside it. Ethan stood quietly, letting the silence speak before he did anything else. ASH rose only when Ethan stood. The dog shook the snow from his coat once, then stepped back, giving space without leaving. His eyes never left the woman. Ethan knelt again. He checked for signs he already knew were not there. No breath, no warmth returning, just peace. The kind that comes after pain has finally loosened its grip. He bowed his head, not in prayer, not in ceremony, just acknowledgement. When he stood, ASH followed. The hike down was slower this time, not because of the terrain, but because neither of them hurried. The mountain no longer demanded speed. What remained required care. Rescue teams met them halfway. Quiet voices. Covered. Stretchers. Respectful distance. Ethan answered questions with short sentences. ASH stayed close, moving only when Ethan moved. At the base station, the world returned to noise and motion. Radios crackled. Boots moved across packed snow. Steam rose from equipment and breath. Life continued. The child was inside a medical tent. Warm. Stable. Alive. Ethan did not go in. He sat on the edge of a crate instead. His hands rested on his knees. ASH lay at his feet, body turned slightly toward the mountain, ears alert but calm. Hours passed. No one rushed them. Later, when the teams began to pack up, a woman from the rescue unit approached. She spoke softly. She asked if Ethan wanted to leave with them. Ethan looked at Ash. The dog did not move. Ethan shook his head. Not yet. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched long across the snow. The mountain changed color as afternoon gave way to evening. Finally, when the last vehicle prepared to depart, Ethan stood. Ash rose with him. They did not follow the road. They turned back toward the slope. The climb was familiar now. Slower. Steadier. No urgency driving their steps. Just purpose. When they reached the ridge, the wind met them again. Colder now. Sharper. The clearing lay quiet once more. Ethan stopped where the woman had been found. The ground was disturbed where the stretcher had been. Snow already filling the space. Nature erasing what it always does. Ash stepped forward and lowered his head. He sniffed the air once. Then he sat. Ethan crouched beside him. He thought of the fire that had taken his own family years ago. The smoke. The heat. The moment he had been forced away. The voices that told him there was nothing more to be done. He had left then. This time he stayed. He rested his hand on Ash's shoulder. The dog leaned into the contact, steady and present. Darkness fell again. They did not light a fire. They did not speak. The mountain wrapped around them, holding the quiet close. Somewhere far below, the child slept. Warm. Breathing. Alive. Up here, the air carried something else. Not lost alone. Something heavier. Something honest. Ethan closed his eyes. For the first time in years, the memory did not push him away. It sat with him. Still. Unmoving. Ash remained beside him. When the stars appeared, bright and sharp against the cold sky, Ethan finally stood. It was time to go. Ash rose at once. They took one last look at the clearing. At the place where staying had mattered. Then they turned and began the descent together. The night did not end cleanly. It stretched. Ethan and Ash descended in silence, the path lit only by moonlight and the faint glow of the sky beyond the ridge. Snow shifted beneath their boots and paws, soft but unyielding. Each step carried them farther from the clearing, yet something of it moved with them, quiet and unresolved. They reached the lower trail before dawn. A temporary shelter waited near the base, simple and dim, warmed by a single generator that hummed steadily against the cold. Ethan guided Ash inside and removed his gloves. His hands were raw, skin reddened from exposure. He did not notice until the heat began to return. Ash lay down near the entrance, facing outward, always watching, always listening. Ethan sat against the wall and closed his eyes. Sleep came in fragments. Not dreams. Memories. Smoke. Heat. The sound of collapsing beams. A voice calling his name from somewhere he could not reach. He woke suddenly. The shelter was quiet. The generator still running. Ash had not moved. Morning came again. This time, the sky was clear. The mountain stood sharp against the light, every line and edge visible. Ethan stepped outside and filled his lungs with cold air. It burned, but it grounded him. A rescue coordinator approached. Calm. Respectful. She spoke of procedures. Of reports. Of recovery teams that would arrive later in the day. She spoke of the child again. Stable. Responsive. Expected to recover fully. Ethan nodded. When she asked about the dog, Ethan looked down. Ash was sitting beside him, eyes lifted, ears forward. He stays with me, Ethan said. The coordinator did not argue. Later, as the shelter emptied and vehicles departed, Ethan packed what little they had. Supplies were light. Movements were slow. There was no rush now. They began walking along the lower ridge, following a path that wound through sparse trees and open rock. The mountain felt different in daylight. Less threatening. More honest. Ash walked slightly ahead, then slowed, matching Ethan's pace. His tail hung low, relaxed. His steps were deliberate. They reached a narrow overlook by mid-morning. The valley opened wide below them, snow catching the light like a held breath. Ethan stopped there. He sat on a flat stone and rested his elbows on his knees. Ash lay beside him, body aligned with his, shoulder pressed close. Ethan spoke for the first time since the night before. I did not stay before, he said quietly. The wind carried his words away almost as soon as they left his mouth. He did not raise his voice. I was told to leave. They said there was nothing more to be done. Ash did not look at him. He did not need to. Ethan stared out over the valley. He could see the faint line of the road far below. The place where help waited. The place where people went when it was time to move on. I believed them, Ethan continued. I walked away. His throat tightened. He paused. The silence did not push him. It held. I have lived with that, he said. Ash shifted slightly, pressing closer. The mountain did not answer. It did not judge. They stayed there for a long time. When they finally stood, Ethan felt something ease. Not resolve, not forgiveness. Just the loosening of a knot that had been pulled too tight for too long. They continued along the ridge, descending slowly toward the trailhead. The day warmed slightly. Snow softened. The sound of water moving beneath ice reached them from somewhere unseen. Near the edge of the trail, Ash stopped. He stood still, body tense, nose lifted. Ethan noticed at once. What is it? He asked softly. Ash moved forward a few steps, and then sat, eyes fixed on a patch of disturbed snow near the rocks. Something small lay half buried there. Ethan approached carefully. It was a child glove. Worn. Thin. Too small for an adult. The fabric stiff with cold. Ethan picked it up and turned it over in his hands. The name of the child was written inside. Careful letters pressed deep into the lining. He closed his eyes. Ash watched him closely. They will want this, Ethan said. The dog remained seated until Ethan stood again. They turned back toward the shelter, toward the place where the child waited, toward warmth and voices and movement. As they walked, Ethan carried the glove close to his chest. The mountain receded behind them, but something of it stayed. Not the cold, not the loss, the staying. And Ash walked beside him, steady as ever, no longer guarding the past, but honoring it. The return to the shelter felt different this time. Ethan walked with purpose, but not urgency. The glove rested in his pocket, folded carefully, its presence steady and grounding. Ash moved beside him, calm and attentive, matching his pace without command. When they reached the base, the shelter was quieter than before. Fewer voices, fewer vehicles. The day had moved on. Inside the medical tent, the child slept. Breathing was even now. Color had returned to the cheeks. The rise and fall of the chest was steady and sure. Machines hummed softly, not as warnings, but as companions. A nurse noticed Ethan standing at the entrance and stepped closer. She did not speak at first. She simply nodded, acknowledging what he had done. Ethan removed the glove from his pocket and held it out. This belongs to the child, he said. The nurse took it gently, as if it were something fragile and alive. Her expression softened when she saw the name written inside. She promised it would be returned. Ethan nodded once. Ash remained at his side, eyes scanning the room briefly before settling again on Ethan. They stepped outside together. The mountain loomed beyond the shelter, distant now, but still present. Clouds moved slowly across its face, revealing and hiding its slopes in equal measure. Ethan sat on a low crate near the edge of the clearing. Ash lay down beside him, head resting near his knee. For a long moment, neither moved. I always thought saving someone meant pulling them back, Ethan said quietly, dragging them away from the edge. He paused. I did not understand staying. Ash lifted his head slightly, ears turning toward him. Ethan rested his hand on the dog's neck, fingers pressing into the thick fur. You knew, he said. You knew what mattered. Ash did not respond. He did not need to. A doctor approached later, speaking of timelines and transitions. The child would be transferred to a hospital before nightfall. Family had been located. Arrangements were being made. Ethan listened, absorbing the information without comment. When the doctor asked if Ethan wished to accompany the transfer, he shook his head. No, he said. The child will not be alone. Ash stood as Ethan stood. The sun dipped lower again, casting long shadows across. The snow. The shelter lights flickered on, soft and yellow against the blue of approaching evening. Ethan walked a short distance away from the tents and stopped. He turned back toward the mountain and bowed his head, just once. Not in farewell. In recognition. Ash stood beside him, steady and present. They did not stay much longer. As night approached, Ethan gathered his pack and adjusted the straps. The road awaited below, winding and narrow, leading back toward his cabin in the high country. Ash followed without hesitation. The first stretch of the road was silent. Snow crunched beneath their steps. The world felt open again, no longer pressing in. Ethan glanced down at Ash. We did not save everyone, he said. Ash looked up at him, eyes calm. But we stayed, Ethan continued. That mattered. The dog tail moved once, slow and measured. They walked on. Behind them, the shelter lights glowed against the dark. Ahead of them, The road curved gently toward home. The mountain remained, holding its stories close. And somewhere within it, something had shifted. Not because life was restored, but because dignity was honored. The road narrowed as they left the last trace of the rescue area behind. Ethan felt the quiet settle deeper with each step away. The sounds of engines and voices faded until there was only wind, snow, and the steady rhythm of movement beside him. Ash walked close, shoulder nearly brushing Ethan's leg, pace even and calm. They had been walking for some time when Ethan noticed the change. It was subtle, a shortening of stride, a slight hesitation before placing weight on one paw. Ethan slowed. Ash continued for 2 more steps, then stopped. The dog stood still, head lowered, breathing steady but heavier than before. His front leg trembled once before he shifted his weight away from it. Ethan knelt immediately. "Let me see," he said softly. Ash did not pull away. Ethan ran his hands carefully along the leg, fingers gentle, searching for heat or swelling. There was a small cut near the joint, shallow but angry red against the fur, likely from the rocks near the ridge. Adrenaline and cold had masked it until now. "You push through," Ethan said quietly. Ash watched him, ears relaxed, eyes clear. Ethan removed his scarf and wrapped it carefully around the leg, securing it with a knot that held without tightening too much. He moved slowly, deliberately, making sure nothing caused pain. Ash stood without complaint. Ethan rose and looked down the road. Home was still a long way off. The weather was turning again. Clouds gathered low, heavy with the promise of more snow. They could turn back. There was a station behind them. Shelter. Supplies. Orders would likely follow if they did. Ethan rested his hand on Ash's shoulder. "We can stop," he said. "We can rest." Ash did not move toward the shelter. Instead, he took a careful step forward. Then another. Slower now, but steady. Ethan understood. They continued. The climb grew harder as the snow thickened. Wind cut through the trees, sharp and persistent. Ethan adjusted his pack and shortened his stride to match Ash's pace. Hours passed this way. Step. Pause. Step again. When dusk fell, Ethan stopped beneath a stand of trees that offered some cover. He cleared a small space in the snow and sat down, pulling Ash close to share warmth. The dog settled against him, body pressed firm and solid. His breathing slowed. Ethan checked the leg again. The cut had not worsened. The wrap held. "You did enough," Ethan murmured. "You do not have to carry it all." Ash rested his head against Ethan's thigh. They stayed like that as darkness deepened. Snow whispered down through the branches. The world narrowed to breath and warmth and presence. At some point, Ethan realized something else had shifted. The weight in his chest was still there. The memories still lived where they always had. But they no longer pushed him forward or back. They sat with him, quiet and acknowledged. Ash lifted his head slightly and looked up at him. Ethan met the gaze. "I am not leaving," he said. The words surprised him with their certainty. "Not you. Not this." Ash exhaled slowly and closed his eyes again. When morning came, the storm had passed. The sky cleared to a pale blue. Snow glittered in the light, untouched and clean. Ethan stood carefully, helping Ash to his feet. The dog tested the injured leg, then nodded once in his own way, ready. They resumed the road. Home waited somewhere ahead, not as a place of escape, but as a place to rest, to heal, to stay. And this time, Ethan did not walk away from what mattered. He walked with it. The transfer vehicle left just after sunrise. Ethan stood at the edge of the narrow road and watched it disappear between the trees, its sound fading until there was nothing left but wind and snow. Somewhere inside that vehicle, the child slept, wrapped in warmth, carried toward a future that would never include the woman who had held on until the very end. Ash stood beside him, quiet and steady. Neither of them moved for a long time. When Ethan finally turned away, it was not toward home. It was back toward the slope that rose behind them, toward the higher ground they had already walked twice. Ash noticed immediately. The dog lifted his head, ears forward, alert but not anxious. When Ethan took the first step uphill, Ash followed without hesitation, even with the injured leg. His pace was slower now, but his resolve had not softened. The climb was deliberate. No urgency, no command, just direction. Snow had shifted overnight, erasing most traces of what had happened days before. But Ash did not need tracks. He moved by memory, by scent, by something quieter that did not fade with time. They reached the ridge near midday. The clearing lay ahead, unchanged in shape, but different in feeling. The space where the woman had rested was now empty, marked only by compressed snow and the faint impression of care that had been taken. Yesh stopped. He walked forward alone and sat at the center of the clearing. Not where the woman had been placed for transport, but where she had first been found. Where she had held her child. Where she had stayed. Ethan remained several steps back. He understood now that this moment was not his to lead. Ash lowered his head and remained still. The wind moved through his fur. Snow brushed his back. He did not lie down. He did not turn away. He stayed. Minutes passed. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest, then ease. He stepped forward slowly and knelt beside the dog. "This is where you chose," Ethan said quietly. Yesh did not look at him. Ethan placed his hand on the ground, pressing his palm into the cold. He closed his eyes and let the memory rise. Not the fire from his past, not the voices calling him away, but the image of a woman holding her child, refusing to let go, choosing presence over escape. He had seen it now, fully, without turning away. "I see it," Ethan said. "I see why you stayed." Ash shifted slightly, leaning closer. They remained there together until the sun dipped behind the ridge and shadows stretched long across the snow. When they finally stood, Ash did not lead the way back immediately. Instead, he turned toward a cluster of rocks at the edge of the clearing and walked to them slowly. Ethan followed. At the base of the rocks lay something small, half hidden by snow and ice. Ash lowered his head and nudged it gently forward. It was a scarf, worn, frayed at the edges. The same color as the glove Ethan had returned earlier. A match. Ethan picked it up carefully, brushing away the snow. He recognized it at once. "She must have dropped it when she climbed," Ethan said. Ash watched him closely. Ethan folded the scarf and held it against his chest. He did not feel the familiar pull to rush away. He did not feel the need to justify anything. This mattered. They descended the mountain one final time as daylight faded. The road felt different now. Lighter. Not because loss had been erased, but because it had been acknowledged. When they reached the lower trail, a rescue coordinator was waiting. She looked at Ethan, then at Ash. "You came back," she said. Ethan nodded. He handed her the scarf. "This belongs with the child," he said. "When the time is right." She accepted it without question. As the vehicle doors closed and the engine started, Ethan turned away without regret. He had done what he could. That night, back near his cabin, Ethan built a small fire outside. Not for warmth alone. For light. For witness. Ash lay beside him, leg resting carefully, eyes reflecting the flames. "You did not save everyone," Ethan said softly. Ash did not move. "But you saved what was left," Ethan continued. "You saved the truth of it." The fire crackled gently. The mountain stood silent beyond the trees. Ash rested his head on his paws and closed his eyes. He had stayed. And because of that, something else had been saved as well. Not a life, but a soul that no longer had to carry its weight alone. The morning after felt quieter than the ones before. Not empty, just settled. Light filtered through the trees around Ethan's cabin, soft and pale, touching the snow without disturbing it. Smoke from the small fire had long faded, leaving only the scent of ash and cold wood behind. The mountain stood unchanged, but something within it had loosened its hold. Ethan stepped outside and drew a slow breath. The air filled his lungs clean and sharp. He did not rush it. Ash lay near the doorway, legs stretched carefully, eyes open and calm. When Ethan moved, the dog lifted his head but did not rise. There was no need. Ethan crouched and rested his hand against Ash's chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath the fur. Strong. Present. Real. "They will remember her," Ethan said quietly. "The child will know she stayed." Ash blinked once. The road beyond the cabin was empty. No vehicles. No voices. Just a long line leading away and the choice not to follow it today. Ethan returned inside and gathered a few simple things. Food. Water. A blanket. He carried them out and sat beside Ash, sharing the space without words. They stayed like that for a while. When Ash finally stood, testing his leg carefully, Ethan rose with him. They walked a short distance together, not far, just enough to feel the ground beneath their feet and the day begin to move. At the edge of the clearing, Ethan stopped. He looked back once more toward the mountain. toward the place where staying had mattered more than saving. "I am not running anymore," he said. Ash stood beside him, steady as ever. They turned back toward the cabin together. Inside, warmth waited, not as comfort alone, but as rest earned through presence. Through choosing not to leave when leaving would have been easier. As the door closed behind them, the mountain remained outside, holding its stories. Some were finished. Some would never be. But one truth stayed clear. They did not save everyone. They did not fix what was broken. But they stayed. And sometimes, that is what grace looks like. The days that followed did not announce themselves. They arrived quietly. Snow melted along the edges of the clearing near the cabin. Water moved beneath the surface of the ground again. The mountain breathed, slow and patient, as if nothing remarkable had happened at all. Ethan did not hurry to fill the silence. He woke each morning, stepped outside, and stood for a moment with Ash beside him. The dog leg healed slowly, carefully, just like the rest of them. There were no medals, no reports that captured what had mattered, no words that fully held the choice that had been made on the mountain. And that was enough. One afternoon, a message came through the rescue channel. Simple. The child was home, safe, surrounded by family. The scarf and glove had been returned. They were kept close. Ethan read the message once and then closed the device. Ash watched him quietly. "That is all," Ethan said. They walked later that evening along the tree line. Not far, just enough to feel the earth settle underfoot. The sun lowered behind the ridge, painting the sky in muted color. No urgency pulled them forward. No memory pushed them back. When they stopped, Ash sat and looked toward the mountain one last time. Ethan rested his hand on the dog's shoulder. "You stayed," he said, "when leaving would have been easier." Ash remained still. The wind passed through the trees, carrying nothing it needed to say. They turned back toward the cabin as darkness settled in. Inside, warmth waited. Not loud, not demanding, just present. Some stories end with victory. This one ended with grace. They did not save everyone. They did not arrive in time. But they stayed. And because of that, something unseen was preserved. Dignity, truth, and the quiet understanding that no soul was abandoned in the final moment. Sometimes, that is the miracle. Some stories do not ask to be remembered. They ask only to be witnessed. If this moment stayed with you, you are welcome to subscribe and remain with us as these quiet stories continue. If you wish, leave a comment with a single word, like here. The next story is already waiting, and it will meet you gently.